Who is wrongly portrayed as a hero. Here's the thing though. Yes, he played a vital role in bringing down Voldy, but he only did that because he was sad that he lost his chance to get Lily. He was only sad about her death because it meant he could never have her, not because her death was sad for her, herself. He did not love Lily, that's an objective fact. He was obsessed with her. He didn't care about her happiness or what she wanted. He only wanted to have her, to possess her. That isn't love, that's selfish and toxic and shitty. Helping to bring down Voldy doesn't erase the fact that he was a terrible person, and only was helping for horrible, fucked up, selfish reasons. And any hot take that ignores what a truly awful human being he was because he helped fight Voldy out of guilt is choosing to whitewash his character. This is why it's so often useful to distinguish between liking a character as a character, and liking them as a person. I agree with you about the fact that he played a really important role in the story and I find his character so interesting in general, as a character, but as a person, I refuse to agree with anyone who thinks he was a good person by any means. That doesn't mean he wasn't important or that he didn't do good things, just that he was a dick. Really, so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I agree with you. Just writing him off as a dick is oversimplifying his character. You can recognize that he did good things while stating that he was a bully. I always think about that when he was headmaster. His punishment for the kids was sending them to the forest with Hagrid. Snape was doing what he could to protect them from harsher punishment from the Carrows. Snape was in a balancing act, protest too much, and end up dead or in hiding. But as headmaster, he could do double-agentish things, plus he was unique in his ability to deflect Voldy's mind tricks. But the fact he gave up their location and started this shit to begin with because he sided with the wizard Nazis and ratted them out, I feel like his later actions don't really redeem him. Snape only relayed part of the prophecy to Voldemort and didn't know that Voldemort would interpret it as describing Harry. The location of Potters was relayed by Pettigrew after they wrongly trusted him as secret keeper. Not that it helps with Snape's character. Remember that he asked Dumbledore only to save Lily and wasn't thinking about James and Harry at all. Even Dumbledore makes the point that Snape disgusts him. His always statement isn't romantic, it's creepy. Yeah, after revealing to Snape the plan to sacrifice Harry and seeing his shocked reaction, Dumbledore asks if Snape finally grew to care for the boy and Snape states for him, and casts Patronus, which indicates that he is still obsessing over Lily. If I'm recalling correctly, when he relayed the prophecy he didn't know who it referred to. It was Voldemort who figured that out later, at which point he scrambled for a way to spare Lily. He's also not the one who gave up their location. That was Peter Pettigrew. That doesn't exactly make him a great person, being fine with James and the baby dying or associating with Voldemort in the first place, but I don't think he ever was willing to hurt Lily. Certainly it's hard to redeem something like that, but I do think he's a person who was predictably fucked up by abuse and neglect, committed some of his worst and irreversible acts as a young, not fully mature person, and after that point tried to do what he could to help the good side even if it could never be enough. It was stated that he acted that way to hide the fact he was a double agent, but the fact he gave up their location and started this shit to begin with because he sided with the wizard Nazis and ratted them out, I feel like his later actions don't really redeem him. He is a selfish incel and is at most okay at the end of it. His always statement isn't romantic, it's creepy. He was so jealous and obsessed he had her killed because he couldn't handle the fact that she chose James, and he tries to make up for what he did after the fact. I'm with you there. Also Minerva, she wasn't as close with Harry, but I think that was her being a good teacher and staying impartial. She cared about him and all her students. She bought him a broom, though maybe she just wanted to win Quidditch, and encouraged him to become an Auror. She also pulled him and the other kids in line, which tbh they needed. She's a good woman. Minerva McGonagall. Yes, Albus, You're named after the old man who groomed me as a sacrificial offering from birth and made sure I spent the time waiting for my imminent death being psychologically abused by the aunt and uncle who hated me. No, Albus, I've never spoken to a therapist about this. Did your mother put you up to that question? There's a guy named Xenophilius, which is an absolutely ridiculous name, and on top of that he loves weird foreign shit, which is literally what his name translates to from Suedalatin, person who loves weird foreign shit. The werewolf is named fucking Remus Lupin, as is Remus and Romulus, who were raised by wolves, and Canis lupus, the scientific name for wolves. His name is basically Wolfing Furboy, and only one person figured it out in the whole last book, the guy who wrote the Transfiguration textbook, Emeric fucking Switch. JKR tended to be a bit on the nose with names. Brian Severus Potter. You were named for the third middle name of the man who raised me to be a lamb to the slaughter, and the first name of the man who had an obsessive fixation on my mother, bullied children as an adult, and also worked as a double agent against Voldemort because of previously mentioned obsessive fixation. I replied to an earlier comment, but this is where this belongs. I never read the books, but sometimes I think about the scene in the final movie where Harry confronts Voldemort in the forest, while they have Hagrid restrained. Hagrid's done all he could to keep Harry safe for years. Even if he was bad at it, he tried, and the last thing he wanted was for Harry to be anywhere near Voldemort. Then when he shouts, "Harry, no, what are you doing here?" Harry's sacrificing himself, and Hagrid must feel totally devastated. He cares about Harry more than so many others. Side note, Robbie Coltrane is a great actor. To be honest, people don't talk enough about how incredibly dystopian the world of Harry Potter is because it portrays itself in a whimsical fashion, and is for kids. The wizarding world is a horrifically antiquated and out-of-touch society which is deeply corrupt to its core, which is full of inhumane and horrific actions being taken by both government and private entities. Even the good guys commit horrible actions against non-magical people pretty regularly. Azkaban is one of the most disturbing ideas imaginable, and people are sent there without trial. And to make it all so much worse, the wizarding world knows next to nothing about the non-magical world. Harry Potter is set in the 90s, and the wizarding world, as portrayed in the books at least, not counting J.K. Rowling's weird ramblings since, is in no way prepared to handle the explosion in surveillance technology. Wizards have nothing to deal with surveillance cameras on every corner, video phones in every pocket, the internet, digital records and satellite imagine, and given how the wizarding world treats non-magicals, we're looking at a setting that's due to rapidly implode into what would probably be a pretty horrific war, regardless of what Pottermore and the low-quality epilogue claim otherwise. The movie would have been fine if there were no villains. Instead, it's all basically good people making bad decisions based on limited information or misunderstanding. The Hans, and a dynamic would have paid off where they do kiss, but the curse doesn't break because they never really loved each other. Hans still wants to save Anna, so he locks her in the room with the fire to stay warm, and goes off to kill Elsa. The escape and saving of Elsa can play off the same. She also made terrible remarks about the woman whose face was disfigured by Travis the chimpanzee, which was very rude because you could see the lady had much more to worry about than her face, especially because that was the first time she had appeared on live TV and showed her face. Yet somehow Oprah did not support her for her immense courage. And she gave Jenny McCarthy a platform to ignite the anti-vax movement. Lots of bad has come from her show, certainly some good, and that many episodes it's hard to not have had anything bad come about. But quite a bit of bad came from her show. Then there's the suggestion she chose not to do anything about Weinstein despite having the knowledge and clout to have done something. My mother used to work in a Chinese herbal supplement store and would spend hours on the phone with customers in the attempt to convince them that a certain product wouldn't heal their terminal cancer, parasites, STDs, etc. But once some people heard otherwise from Dr. Oz and other grifters like him, they didn't care about the science. Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz made their fortunes from preying on desperate sick people. Gabriella was a setback to Troy's potential basketball career. Sharpay was trying to advance it, but I think there is a point to be made, and it's that Gabriella was not as manipulative as Sharpay in her endeavors. Gabriella just wanted Troy, but Sharpay wanted Troy's potential. If you look at the movie now, Sharpay seems to be investing in Troy so she can continue to live a good life. A guy I used to work with years ago had previously worked at the FBI in DC and heard all kinds of stories about J. Edgar Hoover. For one, supposedly when you went in his office there was a Hug FBI seal on the carpet, but it was sunken down in the floor, so when you were standing in his office, his desk was up above you and you had to look up at him like he was some sort of deity or something. Also, one time 2 guys were called into his office to see him. Hoover mentioned one of the FBI agents who worked under them and said, "Give this guy what he deserves." It was unclear from Hoover's tone of voice whether he meant that they should reward the guy or punish the guy, and they were afraid to ask what he meant. They decided to give the guy a promotion, but station him way the fuck out in the middle of nowhere so their asses were covered either way. I know someone who was sexually assaulted by an extended family member. Their mother knew about it, but continually had said extended family member act as their babysitter, frequently telling the person I know to get over it, just play nice for me and go sit in your room if it bothers you that much. If ever there was a malignant cunt, it is that woman. I know I talk to you like you are a literal toddler and flat out refuse to respect you as an adult. But you got annoyed when I tried to explain how to do your job better even though I don't understand your job at all. So now I'm going to play the victim and you have to spend all day catering to me or I'm going to throw a tantrum. My mom. Never let your parents move in with you after you move out. Worst decision I ever made. There is a theory that Butler's character gets the last laugh. Early on in the movie, Fox meets with an ex-special ops guy who gives him info on Butler. He mentions that Butler once invented a tie with a Kevlar rope inside and a ratcheting motor that would tighten the rope and make the tie strangle the target. And what's the very last shot of the movie? Fox is watching his daughter's recital, as the camera zooms in on him, and his extremely conspicuous tie. Almost as if the director wanted to draw attention to it for some reason. I personally believe this theory. If it's not true, that would make both the story about the tie told by the special ops guy, and how extremely eye-catching they make Fox's tie in the final scene, both unfired Chekhov's guns. That was one death that split the theater I watched it in half. Half were laughing their ass off and the other half was kinda mad about it. In both instances I think it's because of how mean-spirited her death is. She's legit just a person doing her job. She isn't mean to the kids. She isn't an asshole. She's completely harmless. It's bizarrely funny how randomly cruel her death is, especially for a franchise like this. Off topic. But her assistant's death scene in that movie was super off-putting and left a bad taste in my mouth for the longest time. At most she was just an annoyed nanny who had to look after 2 kids who couldn't pay attention for shit. Then she just gets one of the worst and drawn-out movie deaths I've ever seen, while the dude that coordinated all of the chaos, Vincent D'Onofrio, had a pretty tame death in comparison. Edit. Apparently the actress, Katie McGraw, actually requested to have her death memorable and brutal, and there wasn't a single stunt double throughout any of it. That makes it a bit more cool, but still gruesome. I like to see them as best friends and Tom just kinda pretends to chase Jerry so his owners don't kick him out or replace Tom with another cat that does want to kill Jerry. Like in the episode where Jerry did die, Tom did everything he could to bring Jerry back. I think if they did dislike each other then Tom would have just let Jerry ascend to heaven. Well, you say both provoke each other, but Tom is a house cat that the homeowners knowingly haven't wanted in their house, and the other is a mouse that is not wanted and steals food and stuff. So when Tom attacks Jerry for being in the house, it's kind of justified. His job to do that for the homeowners. My wife and I went to see a play that actually kind of had this as a premise. The idea was the audience was attending the wedding, but it was interactive. They actually served us food too. Depending on where you sat, or where you wandered around, you would overhear all sorts of conversations from the cast members. There were multiple competing storylines, and sometimes you could do things to influence it, like picking up enough hints and requesting the right song from the DJ. All in all, the wedding was a disaster. What could go wrong did go wrong. It was chaotic, but entertaining. I think we would have enjoyed it more if we had had more heads up. It felt like we missed out on some stuff because we were focusing on different things. Edit. The play was Tony and Tina's wedding at the Manoa Valley Theatre on Oahu. There were a few twists and changes they made to make it more local, but it was basically that. Sophie, Amanda Seyfried, in Mamma Mia. What kind of sociopathic prick invites 3 of her mother's ex-lovers to her mother's hotel on the eve of her wedding, without telling her, to try and force a situation where her real father will be revealed? Then she fucking bails on the whole wedding anyway to go traveling around the world. If I was a wedding guest having forked out thousands to get there for a non-wedding, I'd be livid. From Wikipedia. The play's subtitle, "The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up," underscores the primary theme, the conflict between the innocence of childhood and the responsibility of adulthood. Peter has chosen not to make the transition from one to the other, and encourages the other children to do the same. However, the opening line of the novel, "All children, except one, grow up," and the conclusion of the story indicates that this wish is unrealistic, and there is an element of tragedy in the alternative. Barry was very perspicacious in noticing many aspects of children's mental development decades before they were studied by cognitive psychologists. In particular, Peter lacks the mental capacity for secondary mental representation and cannot recollect the past, anticipate the future, consider two things at once, or see things from another person's point of view. He is therefore amnesic, inconsequential, impulsive and callous. There is a slight romantic aspect to the story, which is sometimes played down or omitted completely. Wendy's flirtatious desire to kiss Peter, his desire for a mother figure, his conflicting feelings for Wendy, Tiger Lily, and Tinker Bell, each representing different female archetypes, and the symbolism of his fight with Captain Hook, traditionally played by the same actor as Wendy's father, all could possibly hint at a Freudian interpretation. See Oedipus complex. Most children's adaptations of the play, including the 1953 Disney film, omit any romantic themes between Wendy and Peter, but Barry's 1904 original, his 1911 novelization, the 1954 Mary Martin musical, and the 1924 and 2003 feature films all hint at the romantic elements. Jeffrey Howard has noted its existential motifs, claiming that Peter Pan is a precautionary tale for those who fear the responsibilities of living, and the uncertainties of dying, which explores concepts like the inevitability of death, freedom to create our lives, alienation, and the notion that existence lacks any obvious or inherent meaning. And his treatment of the Lost Boys is a classic example of psychological, emotional abuse. In the book, Peter kidnaps boys who have gone missing for at least 7 days and convinces them that they need to stay in Neverland because nobody is looking for them. He only takes the dumbest kids because the Lost Boys aren't allowed to be smarter than Peter, and he makes sure that this rule is enforced. For example, the twins aren't allowed to learn about their past because Peter doesn't know what twins are. The boys have been taught to rely on Peter for everything. That way they can't question him or disobey his orders. Edit. Peter doesn't actually care about the Lost Boys and views them as disposable, as evidenced by the fact that he kills the boys if they get too old. I read Peter Pan to my 5-year-old, and it's only through the novel that I saw Peter Pan as a tragic figure rather than a hero. It's actually a very deep story despite being for children. Peter Pan was based on the author's relationship with a young boy who died. He imagined him living in a kind of heaven for young boys, never growing up.